All right, Scott, I'm delighted that we get to sit down and have another conversation. For those who don't know, you and I met because we just recently collaborated on a project for thousands of security professionals
We
who
did.
understand the importance of connecting people in their world to create security. And I've learned more about you, and we wanted to have a deeper conversation about our different perspectives on how people approach the challenge of knitting people together in important ways. So thank you for joining me on this conversation.
Thank you very much. And my joy to be chatting to you, knowing the work that you've done and the research that you've put into this.
Great. Well, for those who don't know who you are, let me quickly introduce you. Your name is Scott Gould. You are now an author. The name of your newest book, Scott?
The shape of engagement.
The Shape of Engagement. You're also a speaker. Of course, you're a consultant on engagement broadly, which is why we work together. Formerly, you're a church minister. So you have a lot of real world practice bringing people together who don't always get along. Am I right about that?
Oh, yeah. In fact, it was once said, you haven't seen a fight until you've seen a church fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I believe you.
so, yeah, no, looking at religion, you get to certainly know what gets to the core of a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In my work, I was never an ordained minister, but I also bring a lens looking at how spiritual traditions bring people
Of
together,
course.
which is to say, we
Yeah.
both have experience seeing how people come together in non-transactional organizations.
Yes. Very well expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And that has great insight that, again, we
Mm-hmm.
often miss in work. But we will both know, and anyone listening will know about this. Businesses are asking, how do we go deeper?
Yeah.
So, yeah, church is a good place to look, as are other religions.
So now your professional work is secular, and you spend time exploring how people engage with ideas and each other. And this means helping organizations understand how employees engage with each other, customers, and the communities they're within. And organizations you've worked with over the years include the United Nations, UNICEF, Nokia, Radiometer, and Microsoft. So big
Yeah.
names that have big reach. So congratulations on getting yourself to a place where you're making a difference.
Yeah, the radiometer was a great one. That was during the pandemic. That was really great. How do people engage when you're doing it all over a camera? That was a really great challenge. And as you say, it's also looking at how do we engage as customers, as employees, as communities, because as many will appreciate, the skill of building a relationship doesn't change. The neurocircuitry doesn't change, it remains the same. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever someone is a customer or a community member or a colleague, the psychology of engagement always runs in the same way. And if we know that, that's a superpower for us.
So one of the things that you had brought up when you had encountered my work, and I talk about we need to teach leaders to create small events
Mm.
to emulate the campfire experiences our families have been hosting for untold generations.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, I don't say that you always need to burn wood. My point is we need to create events that are like the events that our families for generations have burned wood instead of the big loud events that we don't connect at. And you brought up something. You said that you're aware that contemporary research has shown that when we experience physical warmth, which can include a physical fire, physical hot meal, or even a hot drink, that
Mm.
that actually shifts our experience of connecting with people that we're experiencing that warm with. So will you go deeper on that?
Yeah, the phrase they use is physical warmth promotes
Mm,
interpersonal warmth. And the thinking is quite basic. If we skip back 10,000 years, being around a campfire was a place of safety. The warmth protected you from the cold. It often meant that you had something that would protect you in terms of intruders or so forth because you had weapon. There you had the safety of other people. So being warm quite literally makes people feel safe. They lower their guard. And so, yeah, the research indicates that if you want to influence people towards more pro social or pro compliant behaviors, a good thing to do would be to give them a hot drink or for them to be in a warm space. And so, let's say you're running a meeting and you want to kind of win people over, you might decide, I'm actually going to serve a hot drink as opposed to cold water. I mean, it's just a small little thing. And on the contrary, when we serve cold drinks, people do think more detached. So if you're going into a lawyer meeting, right, they're going to serve you water. You're not going to be having coffee at the table while you're doing negotiations. Although maybe you might want to,
right. Well,
as a
Chris
way
Voss
of
would say
like,
the more empathy, the more better, right?
yeah, Chris Voss would say the more empathy, the more better. And I would agree. And I think there again, we kind of get this idea, right, that somehow there's going to be like, fighting and there's going to be battles. So yeah, physical warmth promotes interpersonal warmth, and this makes a lot of sense if we think about the story of religion, particularly. Is is any religious gathering is going to be around warmth. There's going to be some kind of fire, or there's going to be a lot of people in a space that's going to create physical warmth. There's generally going to be hot drinks of some kind, even food. If we think about those religious gatherings that all are based around food, I'm thinking particularly, let's say, of Passover, Jewish feasts. So all that thing of being around warmth is creating quite literally a interpersonal warmth at the same time, which is obvious when you say it, but then often we just don't actually think about this.
Sure. Well, what I kind of love about you bringing up this point is my general relationship to teaching the ideas that I teach to leadership is I don't care why it works, right? So like, I don't care that we know that people sharing soup and hot cocoa on a cold night makes them feel good and become friends. And hopefully, Scott, you've shared soup with people on a cold night, become better friends, right? I
Yeah.
don't care. Just do it, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you and I stand up on stage somewhere and people want to say, well, what's the evidence? It's like, oh my God. Well, the evidence is like, I don't know, 10,000 years, people eating around fires and building friendships that matter. But fair enough. We'll look at the research. And then the contemporary research, and I'm sure you know this, Scott, has delineated layers and layers of things going on, like the smell that we experience.
Yeah.
The lighting makes a difference. We know that whether you perceive the other person dresses like you makes a difference. Like there's these layers and layers of things that are all coming together when you sit around and literally or figuratively drink soup together. And so you've brought yet another layer that's going on, which you and I might say, who cares what the science says? Go share soup, right? Or go share hot cocoa. But fair enough. If you need contemporary research, turns out hot soup makes the experience better.
Absolutely right. I think we can often get a lot of guidance by just imagining what would people do 10,000 years ago and emulate that.